I work for a company called Interceptd. We're a global fraud detection company. The topic of fraud is not always incredibly sexy or compelling, but it is really interesting, and I'm going to try to make it entertaining for you guys. A little bit about me before I dig in. I have spent 20 years in mobile as of this July, which kind of blows my mind. The entirety of my career, actually. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, I'm not necessarily proud of that, but it just definitely dates me. But I started with a telecommunications company right out of college when cell phones were really hitting the market in 1999. And they were begging me to come on board because they were literally so overwhelmed with their rapid device sales that they were like, their lock boxes where you send your payments, the PO boxes, were overflowing with payments, and their billing systems were breaking. So it was a really interesting time of growth. Then I was fortunate to move to the San Francisco Bay Area and totally flip things over and go to work for software with Electronic Arts video game company, and spent a couple years on mobile gaming before they acquired Jamdat, and then also on in-game advertising. So that kind of helped build a really strong foundation. And then I went to a startup. I was the 5th employee at a mobile ad network called Graystripe. Now, this was in 2006. Graystripe was building pre- and post-roll interstitial ads in Java devices. I'm totally dating myself here. But, you know, I was like going to like Starcom in Chicago and talking to somebody on the Nintendo account saying, you really should buy this. And they're like, how many unique eyeballs? I'm like, I don't know, 10? I don't know. Like, you should. And then she's like, what's the price? I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to pay? $28? Like, what CPM works for you? So it was very early stage. We quickly shifted when iPhone came out to adapt that technology to iPhone. And I think the interesting thing about that story is we really learned that consumer adoption was about taking an online ad, a 300 by 250, and serving it into mobile so that we could just really kind of scale that business by not having to create a unique creative. Then I worked for an attribution company because I really wanted to understand the nuts and bolts of attribution, which is incredibly dry and painful and confusing and cumbersome, but important, absolutely critical in this business. So I spent 15 months with Kochava and learned the nuts and bolts of attribution. So now I'm so pleased to say that I represent a fraud software company, a global fraud software company. I finally feel for the first time like I represent the good guys. I've seen all sides of the story, and that definitely shapes why I work for Interceptd. So what is a meth bot? Anybody know? It doesn't have anything to do with Breaking Bad, so unfortunately, it's not that exciting. Breaking Bad, like the longest series ever. Like my husband binged watched that thing for like 2 months. I was like, oh my god. Anyway, I digress. A meth bot, exactly. Breaking Bad just goes on and on. So a meth bot was actually a fraud ring that was exposed in 2017. They were netting about $3 to $5 million a day in fraud theft. Across multiple types of channels, including mobile, and it was crazy. So they got caught. They were one of the largest fraud rings that have been caught to date. App install fraud, what is it? I mean, it comes in so many shapes and sizes in so many ways, and it's constantly shifting, which I find it to be kind of exciting. I mean, at lunch today, I had a really great conversation about how really the beautiful thing about fraud, it's like the yin and yang of mobile software, right? So on one side, there's the good guys. We're creating this ecosystem. We're building software. On the other side are the hackers trying to figure out the holes in the software, right? So it's just kind of this back and forth in technology and software. My favorite fraud type, SDK spoofing. Anybody here in the audience know what SDK spoofing is? Anyone? Anyone? Wow. All right. Oh, this guy knows. Okay, good. So SDK spoofing is actually my favorite fraud type. It's the most interesting to me. That's when they actually hack the attribution company's SDK. That way, the attribution company cannot detect the organic installs that the client is receiving through organic search methods. They also fake post-install events so they look like a real user. So they'll fake 2 or 3 funnel events so that they can go undetected by the attribution company. So I was talking with my friend Sam at Tubi TV recently, and she's like, I'm pretty sure I've probably built lookalike audiences based on fraudulent installs that were faking, events that I thought were real. And I'm like, that's very possible. So SDK spoofing is one of the most trickiest forms of install fraud today. Click spamming, very common, very well known. This is where they basically have like another app potentially running on the device, maybe a flashlight app. There's a lot of those out there. And while that app is running in the background, they're sending clicks, just tons of clicks into the App Store ecosystem. They're finding URLs, they're taking those ad campaign URLs, and they're just throttling them with clicks. This is where if you're a big brand, and you have a lot of natural organic installs, or you have a lot of content, this is where you're going to get hurt the most because they're going to steal all of your organic installs through this click spamming process. So let's just say, for example, I go to the App Store, I search Amazon, I download the app, they're going to steal that click. The minute my thumb hits install, the fraudster's already been throwing clicks into the ecosystem to steal that click. And so now that's a paid install, according to your attribution company, when it should have been free. And there's a lot of that happening. Click hijacking, very similar scenario, just done through a different process. I don't want to go through every single one of these for a long time. I'm trying to keep you guys awake. Hopefully that sugar's still keeping you guys high. But device ID reset, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's basically like you install the app, you delete it, you reset your device ID, you reinstall the app, and they're constantly stealing that bounty. Ad stacking, an oldie but goodie, as I like to say, where they take multiple banner ads in the mobile web environment and they stack them so that those clicks, it looks like 3 clicks versus 1. So they're just kind of stealing the click URLs there. And then click flooding, which is very specific to Android devices. The Google Play Store has a few cool calls that are used for other things, but fraudsters have found ways to leverage those calls. And one of them is when there's an app that's being installed on an Android device, Google says, app is being installed. And the fraudster quickly listens for that signal and just floods it with clicks, just takes clicks and just floods them into the ecosystem to steal those organic installs. So there's some fraud tactics. Now, I'm not really a fear monger by any means, but it is a little bit scary when you look at the stats. When you think about the growth rate of fraud, it's kind of insane. My favorite one here is 1 out of every $3 on ad spend is lost to fraud. At one point, Charles Manning, the CEO of Kochava, was telling clients it was about 66% of their ad spend. So think about that for a minute. This is another really fun one, and it kind of goes back to the Breaking Bad. Mobile ad and attribution fraud are the biggest forms of organized crime after gun smuggling, narcotics, and human trafficking. That's a fun category. So who are the fraudsters? What do they look like? Well, there's this guy. He doesn't really have a name, but he's based in Moscow, and he runs a legitimate gaming company. And, he used to work for AdX, which one of our advisors built AdX, David Phillipson. And, he's also a client of AppsFlyer and Adjust. He looks legitimate, but the truth is he's stealing bounties from CPI campaigns on a regular basis. Next guy over here, he runs a legitimate global ad network. He just happens to be based in Beijing, and he works with real publishers and advertisers every day. So again, it's kind of like a front, but it's an operational front. This front helps him be a better fraudster because he has access to all the campaign URLs he needs and all the app stores he needs. Just to give you an example of what fraudsters look like. So how has this happened? This is kind of my favorite part of the story, looking back, having been in mobile for such a long time. I think it's interesting that the environment has actually been a hospitable environment for fraud growth. And I say that because I remember in the early days when I was helping build a mobile ad network in Java and an iPhone. And it was about a game of uniques, and it was about reaching a good volume of users. And now we're kind of at mass reach, and in the sense that, there's multiple DMPs that have all the device IDs. Everybody's, all the attribution companies say they've seen every device in the world, but the truth is that in the early days, there was a lot of unrealistic growth expectations. So if you were an app and you were well funded by an investment company, you were expected to have a hockey stick growth. You launch a new piece of content, you better have a healthy marketing budget behind it, and you better see a ton of installs. And just having those expectations kind of create an ecosystem where fraudsters can capitalize on those marketing dollars. Additionally, this is also very interesting, there's multiple stakeholders that benefit from fraud. So, the truth is, attribution companies have made a lot of money on fraud over the last 10 years. Now they realize they shouldn't be making money on fraud, and now they all have fraud products. But in the early days, they were making a ton of money on fraudulent clicks and installs. Additionally, ad networks were making a lot of money on fraudulent installs because they charge on an install basis. So, multiple stakeholders. If you're head of user acquisition, some companies were giving people kickbacks for hitting certain growth expectations. So why would you want to block your installs if there's a potential bonus on the other side? Anyway, the sad thing is because of these kind of unrealistic expectations, ad fraud will reach 50 billion by 2025. So I always like to pose the question, what happened to quality over quantity? Let's really focus on what matters. Monthly active users, users opening the app and coming back, taking funnel actions, maybe even an in-app purchase. That's really what matters. That's the value that everybody's looking for. Unfortunately, marketers have had a bad experience. And there's many of you in the room today that have probably worked with partners that have burned you. I remember there was a brief time I worked for an ad network. I had just had a couple kids. I took some time off. I went back to work. And I sold a campaign for like a retailer. And they were delivering the campaign. And upon the reporting, I was like, well, why did we reach such a few number of uniques? Like, it was a very small number of uniques compared to the budget. And they said, well, we didn't frequency cap. You didn't frequency cap. I'm sure you all have had some experience like that if you're dealing with advertising budgets, because people want to capitalize on those dollars. So people have been burned, bad experience, fraud, your campaigns have been rebrokered. You may not even know that, but people take the URLs and they resell them. But just because you've been burned doesn't mean that you should focus only on walled gardens. So often I have conversations with companies, big companies like Expedia, and he's like, well, we were advertising on ad networks, but the truth was, we were exposing ourselves to so much fraud, we decided to just cut our budget and only go to Facebook and Google. Well, great, but I hate to tell you, there's a couple problems with that solution. One, you're not actually reducing complete access to fraud. Organic attribution fraud can still happen to you. Two, you don't have as much transparency or flexibility or freedom when you're working with the walled gardens. Three, you're paying incredibly high user acquisition costs. You have less control over your spend, right? And it also, prevents your advertising real estate from really hitting a ton of unique eyeballs. Well, you can argue with me that everybody's on Facebook. I think there's something to be said with diversification of real estate and where your ads are being displayed. So my advice to you is if you've been burned, don't be afraid. You just need the right solution, and you need to build something in your business that gives you confidence to test multiple channels for new users. So this is the quick sales pitch. Interceptd, independent, real-time fraud detection. We're a very simple tag-based tool that sits between your attribution company and your supply-side partners. Why would you want an independent? Because my only purpose in life is to help you detect and block fraud, to eliminate as many false positives as I possibly can, and to help you save money on your supply-side channels. Very simple, filter, tag-based, easy to integrate, great way of testing new partners. We come from the roots of ad network aggregation. So Interceptd owns another company called App Samurai. That's an ad network aggregator. We quickly learned by building that business that there was a ton of fraud in the bid stream. And so we started building fraud tools inside App Samurai. Then we quickly realized that we should really double down on fraud. That's where our passion was and our strength was. And we built Interceptd. So we actually have access to some of the dirtiest bid stream data you could imagine. And as my CTO says, it's like gold. We mine through that data, and we're constantly innovating and iterating and looking for new fraud schemes and tactics. So with our tools, we help you, detect fraud, but we also help you optimize your ad spend on where you should spend it. We provide, well, I would say this, I encourage you to test independent mobile ad networks. I encourage you to find other channels for new users off of Google and Facebook. You can do that with confidence with any fraud tool. I met someone today. They have their own fraud tools. They built them themselves. That's great. Have a fraud tool in place before you start working with new partners. That's my advice. Because there's a lot of innovation happening through these independent companies because they're really fighting to win budgets against Google and Facebook. And I think it's only fair that we support innovation, and innovation often will drive success for your business. And, I'd love to offer you the protection you need for your campaigns, help you protect the integrity of your app and your brand, and most importantly, your data.